2026 is going to be an awesome year. We got some pretty cool stuff coming up. First off, we got Foundations of Recovery. This is our flagship program. We're starting it in January.
This is for anyone, man, woman, or couple who wants to come and reclaim their heart from shame, trauma, and betrayal. We start off with an education on all sorts of principles, give you the common language. We feed you from a fire hose in terms of all things recovery.
It is such a great start to recovery. And we get at the roots of things, Tyler. This isn't like any other program. Like, this is our healing journey in process, and Foundations is where we begin.
If you look at the value that you're getting there to kick off a good recovery with all of the right education, all of the right language, and a team to get you started while also being directed by Brandon and myself through the whole process, what a deal.
So if you're interested, if you're struggling, if you've been wanting to do something for a long time, jump into this. This only comes around every so often, and we would love to have you there.
Click the link in the description to sign up for it. And to make it even sweeter, we're also including a raffle for a free pass to the Radiant Dawn retreat. Anyone who signs up for Foundations will be added to the raffle for that free Radiant Dawn pass. If you're a man and you sign up for Foundations, your name still gets entered, and you can give that pass away if you win it to any woman that you want to.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is if you sign up and participate in Foundations, you could possibly go to Radiant Dawn for free?
That's exactly what I'm saying, which is crazy because Foundations by itself is already an insane value.
Man, I sound so salesy. But it actually is awesome. So come to Foundations. And even if you don't come to Foundations, sign up for Radiant Dawn. It's beyond therapy, the best healing experiences that you can have.
Click the link below and come join us.
I need help in the process of forgiveness from betrayal trauma.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast. I'm Brandon.
I'm Tyler. We're brothers.
We're therapists.
We're not afraid of your questions.
So bring it.
All right, you guys, that is an awesome question. I'm excited to be here with you today. I'm Tyler, your wandering therapist. I'm alone today without Brandon. Brandon got tied up with a bunch of other things today, and he's left me in a lurch. I'm kind of shooting as the backup guy. We know Brandon is the expert, and Brandon is also, I call him the celebrity, because he seems to be pretty well known by people in the world that we live in. So you guys are left with the second hand today, but I'm hoping to be helpful. We've got some really good questions today. I'm going to try to lump a few questions together so that we've had so many questions coming in, and we're having a hard time getting to everybody's questions. So I'll be covering several questions today on betrayal trauma. It's something that Brandon and I both specialize in, and it's something that's right in the wheelhouse of what a lot of our questions are. So I'm putting a bunch of questions together. We'll probably get to 2 or 3 questions, but they'll actually be covering several that have come in. So hopefully this will be helpful for you guys today. We really appreciate your questions. We also really appreciate your feedback. We've been getting a lot of feedback. Your ratings and reviews have been really helpful to us. The things that have been sent to us in private have also been really helpful. We're trying to make as good of a product for you as possible because we want to make a difference in helping you with whatever your issues are, hoping that we have something that might offer some help and some guidance with that. So before we get started with our questions today, I'm just going to read our review for the day. This one comes from Smiles in Wyoming, and it just says, "Thank you. Tyler and Brandon are awesome. I can't say enough about how much they've helped us with their straightforward and honest approach to things. They keep it real and provide awesome tools for moving forward in a healthy, happier way. I really appreciate the latest episode on how church leaders can help the betrayed. I know this is an area that really needs to be addressed. Thank you guys for all you do." Well, thank you, Smiles. Appreciate you listening, and also appreciate your feedback there, and appreciate your willingness to put yourself out there and share that way. So, all right, you guys, let's jump into some questions today. These are all going to be questions that are somewhat related to betrayal trauma. It looks like most of the questions here have been written by spouses, mostly wives who have experienced betrayal trauma. And so we'll just jump into the first one. It says, "Help for the betrayed. How do I forgive the spouse who is working to change after disclosure? How to help the relationship heal as well as your hurt heart? How to know if the spouse has told all the truth? Would love your and Tyler's help to overcome this burden. Thank you for your question and concern. This process is so hard. It sounds like you've been in this for quite a while and you're really working on trying to work towards reconciliation in your marriage and have it work out. And the first thing that I would just say is that if you're doing the right things and if both of you are doing your own individual work, that there is definitely hope for you to not only rebuild whatever marriage was there, but actually have something completely new and something that might even be better than something you've never had before in your marriage. But it does take time, and it's a really, really hard process. And one of the ways that I like to look at things with my betrayed partners when we're doing therapy, like in group or whatever it is we spend a lot of time linking the process of forgiveness to the process of grief. And it sometimes provides a framework that allows you to look at things through a different light. Oftentimes, a betrayed partner is stuck in this weird no man's land where on one hand, you're feeling all of these things that you feel, betrayed, you don't have trust, you don't know if you're safe emotionally within the relationship, you don't know what else you don't know. And so everything is a little bit stable and unshaky. And then, of course, there's all the feelings that come with the betrayal. In addition to that, things like sadness and despair and anger. A lot of times, a lot of betrayed partners spend a ton of time in the realm of the bargaining part of the grieving process, which is them trying to figure out how to wrap their head around how they could possibly stay when they've experienced all of these things and what would need to happen in order for them to stay. And it's just a really confusing, hard time. And so understanding the process and allowing yourself some patience and some room. And for any of those spouses who have done the betraying, if you hear this, it's really important that you hear this, is that the more, we call it, ridiculously patient you can be, the better off you've got a chance at helping your partner to do some healing. Because the grieving process is not a linear process. A lot of you are probably familiar with the 5 stages of grief. You've got your denial, which is that step that's like, no, this isn't actually happening. I'm going to turn a blind eye. I'm going to pretend it's not there. I'm going to try to avoid it. I don't want to see it. And then the next step is anger. And anger is this natural tendency that we all have, that when something has happened to us that isn't fair, especially when something has happened to us where we have either had something taken from us, which in betrayal, there's all sorts of things that get taken from us. We lose that feeling of emotional safety and security. We start to struggle with and lose other things sometimes, like our core beliefs, and sometimes it has threads into all other parts of life, the way we look at ourselves, our self-image, the way we have a relationship with God. It has a tendency to go into all those things. And so anger is often this natural response that comes, that when something has been taken from me unjustly, anger is the natural feeling. Or it's also a feeling that comes up when we feel like we need to defend something. So when our values get threatened, we tend to have anger come up because it's a protective thing that happens. And a lot of partners that we work with, they get stuck in a couple of the places. So you've got, your denial, your anger, your depression, your bargaining, and then finally acceptance. And we say those as if it's a linear process, and yet all it is it's 5 different places where we sort of end up, and we jump around back and forth over and over again, and we almost can recycle those same kind of stages multiple times before we finally start to settle in more and more in the acceptance place. And acceptance, this is a hard one for people to understand sometimes too, is that acceptance isn't accepting that this is just the way that it's going to be, and I'm just going to roll over and I'm going to take this the rest of my life. That's not acceptance. Acceptance is coming to a place of understanding the reality of my situation, understanding that things are what they are, that my partner has done these things, and that my partner is doing whatever they're doing now, and I'm going to have to make some choices about what I can and can't do in order to keep my values intact, but accepting those things. And it's similar. You see this happen, especially with death, because we all have to go through it with death, where we go through these cycles and these stages, and we sort of rinse and repeat them over and over again. But the more that we do it, oftentimes the loops get bigger and longer, and we spend more and more time in acceptance and less time in these other places. A couple of the common places that I see partners get stuck at, and there's good reason for it, is in anger. Anger is, because it's protective, it's also one of the safest places to be when I'm in a relationship and I don't know if I'm emotionally safe or stable or secure, when my world is kind of going all over the place. And so often what will happen is with a betrayed partner that I work with, they'll come into the office and first their world is just spinning. It's like they've been thrown in the spin cycle in the washing machine and hit spin, and they just barely getting enough oxygen to breathe emotionally. They feel crazy, they feel worn out, they feel spent, they're on high alert. A lot of times there's even symptoms that are similar to PTSD that are going on for a partner. And the first part of treatment is it's like triage work. It's trying to help the partner just learn how to be grounded again, learn how to trust that they can manage their own emotions again, learn how to be able to kind of navigate their world again. And then it moves into kind of a new tier where they start to go, okay, now we want to start moving towards either moving on and having to make decisions towards divorce, or figuring out if I'm going to stay in this relationship and how I can make that happen. And a lot of times anger is the vehicle that after the triage, after the crisis, then anger becomes this way where I can hold on to my relationship, but I don't have to be vulnerable. And so now I can be critical of my spouse. I can continue to be angry about how I've been treated. I can have all of these things happen, and I don't have to like be vulnerable with what my true feelings are about the values that I've had affected, or the ways that I'm truly feeling, but I can hold on to my partner, my husband, in a way where now he's going to have to talk to me and I get to talk to him, even if it's through angry ways. And I get to maintain my distance at the same time. I don't have to let go of the relationship. And that's kind of a plateau that a lot of couples hit for quite a while, until they realize that if they actually want to start stepping a little bit deeper into the recovery process, and as trust starts to build over time, then I can start to lay down that anger a little bit. And another place where I see couples getting stuck a lot is in the bargaining stage. And I think the bargaining stage is connected a little bit to denial sometimes. But what happens in bargaining is that a betrayed partner doesn't really want to leave their spouse. They don't really want to have to make the decision to stay or to go in the relationship, because number one, it wasn't fair for them to be in that situation in the first place. Number two, there's a whole lot of unknown that goes along with that. And a lot of times there's a whole lot of other logistical things that are going to be affected by that process of the decision making. And so what will often happen is that bargaining stage becomes another place where I don't necessarily have to make decisions that might be the writing on the wall when I'm looking at them. And so I can bargain with my partner and say, well, if you do this, 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 and this, then maybe I can start to forgive. And then if the partner doesn't do that, then you come back with a different bargain instead of following through on the boundary that you were going to set, because you're afraid of what the boundaries implications might be. And so being patient with each other during that process, allowing some room for some boundaries work to start to take place, even if it's ugly at first. And we can talk about boundaries on a different episode if we want to, but allowing patience and time, ridiculous patience and time, being compassionate with yourself and with each other over the fact that this process does take time. A lot of the couples that I work with, they kind of go through these plateaus that we're talking about, and it won't be until after several years, 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 years, before I'll bump into somebody in the grocery store or something, and they'll say, man, Tyler, our marriage is better than it's ever been. It's been hell. I never want to go through this again, but I'm so glad we did this because it was so worth it to work through this. That's a long time. That's a long time for people to wait, especially in a world where we're ready for instant gratification. And one of the things that causes more stress and pressure is the pressure to get over it quickly, and understanding that, we don't want to stay stuck. Like, everyone wants to get out of that victim place. Everyone wants to get out of that miserable place. But we have to allow ourselves to go through all of those different kinds of stages. And if we dismiss one or two of those, sometimes we get stuck there because there's this unprocessed emotion that we haven't really had a chance to kind of figure out and to speak and to work through and to let it go. And one more thing just to say, to partners, the ones who actually done the betraying, whether it's infidelity or pornography or whatever it is, that the best thing that you can do to help your betrayed partner with forgiveness isn't to go to them and say, hey, I'm doing so good. Look at me. Tell me how good I'm doing. And can't you see how good I'm doing? And you need to forgive me. Don't do that. The best thing that you can do is you can look yourself in the mirror every day, get busy doing your own recovery work, because you need to be that kind of a husband or father, and do that day in and day out. Start to show up the way that you want to as a man in your relationship with your wife, and let your wife start to see those things as a byproduct. There'll be little drops of trust that start coming into the bucket as you become more and more consistent in your pursuit of becoming your best self. And consistent effort and action over time is what restores trust. And as trust becomes restored, it's easier to start letting the guards down. It's easier to start being more vulnerable again. And it's in the vulnerability with each other, as we establish trust over time, that we actually find the deepest levels of connection. So hopefully some of these thoughts are helpful for you. Allow yourself to be in those stages and to acknowledge that that's all part of the process, and look for a place where you might have an outlet to speak some of those feelings as you go through them. And I'm suggesting you may have another outlet besides your partner, because you want to take those things to your partner. Sometimes they'll be able to hold it, and other times they won't. And you're still going to need a place to find that support and speak that, and have a spot where your story can be held and heard. So really, really good question. Thank you for sharing. Let's move on to another question here today, you guys. This is, how do I tell if I'm too independent, distant, or avoidant in my marriage? How can I tell if my spouse is too codependent, needy, or anxiously attached? I feel really comfortable with where our relationship is at, but my husband feels our relationship leaves much to be desired. How does one start a conversation with their spouse about them being too needy or too cold and distant? What can we do to have a more balanced and healthy attachment? And what does that look like in the marriage relationship? So a really, really good question. This looks like the person asking the question here might be relating to, if we talk, we talk a lot about attachment theory and different styles of attachment. And there's a few different styles of attachment. And one of them is obviously the anxious style of attachment, which is the needy one that you're talking about. And the avoidant style of attachment would be the one that's more disconnected and maybe avoiding, the connection in the relationship. And you're saying, how do I tell where the healthy line is in all of this? That's a really, really good question. I'd say start to consider a couple of things with the principles of something called interdependence. And interdependence is the situation where I'm comfortable enough with myself to know who I am, and to know that I'll be okay if I'm alone, and to then willingly choose to invest myself into a relationship with somebody where I sometimes maybe compromise on things or allow people to influence me for the sake of having that connection. And so when you look at your relationship, is your husband approaching you from a place of independence, interdependence, where he can come to you and offer you his strength and say, I really do want to connect with you. I love spending time with you. I'm going to be okay if you don't for a minute, but that's part of what I want in our marriage and our relationship. And I just love spending time with you. Or is he coming to you saying, like a 3-year-old that's just got dropped off at daycare that's afraid his mom's never coming back, where he's essentially emotionally like clinging to your knee and begging and pouting if you go somewhere alone, or if you decide to do a girls' night or something? That's more indicative of the anxious attachment style sort of rearing its head, that isn't necessarily healthy, because then what you'll end up doing is that you get sucked into having to always be there to like meet the need or fill the void. And if you don't, then they're upset with you, or they don't, they're angry that you're not available, or they feel betrayed and abandoned. And and what it becomes is this endless loop of a bottomless pit where you can never actually feel what they're looking for, because what they're looking for is actually a need that needs to start working from the inside out, of knowing that they're lovable as they are without having to have it. And then when you can give it, it just is an added bonus on top. And this is tricky, because the paradox is that we are wired for attachment and connection. Like, we desire to be with people. In fact, human beings don't really survive very well without human connection. And yet human connection is best formed when two people who know who they are choose to be in a relationship together. So the avoidant person, often they feel okay with themselves enough, but they don't necessarily trust other people that much, and so it's easy for them to move away. And so when you said, I feel really comfortable with where our relationship is at, there's a good question to ask yourself, and to just be curious with it, and ask yourself, is that your avoidance talking, or is that your independence or interdependence talking? So if your avoidance is talking, you're saying, hey, look, we're good. Like, I've got a couple right now that I'm working with where the man is the avoidant one in the situation, and he's coming into my office and saying, yeah, life has never been better. Like, life is great. Like, we're getting along really good. Things are awesome. And then she comes in like the next hour and she says, man, I'm going crazy here. He's never around. He works all the time. We never have a real conversation about anything. The only thing we ever talk about is surface things, like where to get the kids at certain times. And I'm like withering on the vine here because I have no connection with him. Otherwise, he's coming at it from a pretty avoidant place where he's saying things are great, even though there isn't really a relationship happening, right? Where the avoidant person is, if you recognize that it's avoidance, how do you overcome this? The challenge is to recognize it, and the avoidant person's challenge is to, with practice, is to stop running and to learn how to turn around and gently lean in, not maybe go all the way. And the anxious person, so it looks like in this case, your husband would be the anxious one, possibly. In the anxious person's case, we call it pursuer softening. We want the anxious person to slow down the approach a little bit. If you can't slow down the approach, that's a pretty good indication that it's coming from an anxious place and not an interdependent place. But if you can slow down the approach a little bit and allow space for your partner to turn around because they're feeling smothered and actually see you, that's how the relationship comes back into being a little bit more healthy and strong. So how do I talk to my partner about this? That's a good question. I think being sensitive to, if you understand the different attachment styles, you can use some of that knowledge to your benefit when you bring up the conversation. And so, for instance, if you feel like your husband's over pursuing or feeling a little bit anxious or is too needy, you could go to him in one hand and say something like, hey, you're smothering me, or man, you are so insecure. And you can pretty much know how that conversation is going to go. It's not going to go well. Or you could read between it and understand, what's the drive behind the neediness. The drive behind the neediness is this intention and desire to want to feel connected, to want to be appreciated, to want to know that they're secure and safe in the relationship. And if you understand that, you might be able to bring it up by saying, hey, whatever your husband's name is, I want to talk to you about something. I noticed that, when I go out on a girls' night, you seem to panic quite a bit and you feel like I'm not valuing you, or you want all of my time when you're home, when we're both home and the kids are in bed. And I'm really glad that you want to spend time with me, and I like spending time with you too. And I appreciate that you value being with me. And I need you to understand that sometimes it's healthy for me to spend a little bit of time in other places doing other things. And I trust that you can understand that, and that you could also probably benefit from spending some time alone, whether that's in your own thoughts or with going out on a boys' night or doing something else, so that we can both really enjoy one another when we're here. You could go a little bit further and be honest and just say, sometimes it makes me want to move further away when it feels like I don't have a lot of space to actually lean in and be part of the relationship. I feel like sometimes there's so much pursuit, which I understand why. It's because you want to be with me, and I'm hoping because you love me. But sometimes that feels a little bit like too much for me, or a little bit smothering, and then it's hard for me to want to lean back in. And then you probably sense that, and it probably isn't very good for you. So hopefully that's helpful for you. I think it's a really, really common thing. This is something that even without betrayal trauma, this is like the classic thing in relationships. You get the pursuer distancer. It's like playing leapfrog the whole time you're with each other, where one person moves away and the other person chases, and it's just playing leapfrog until eventually the person who's chasing gets tired and they stop. And then oftentimes people will flip roles and then they'll play it the other way for a minute. Really what it's based off of is the inability to be truly vulnerable with each other and to trust one another, and to trust self. If I trust myself, then I can go into my relationships knowing that I can just offer who I am. And if it's not met with like acceptance, it's going to be hurt. It's going to hurt and be painful, but it's not going to define me as a person. And I'm going to be able to set boundaries and move on and live accordingly. And so a lot of the times, something behind this question that people don't necessarily like to hear all the time is that if you notice that you're in either spot, either the anxious or the avoidant place in your relationship, there it might be a sign that there's either some boundaries out of place, or that there's some additional internal work to do to be in a place of acceptance and confidence of liking what you see in the mirror on an individual basis. So hopefully that's helpful for you. Thank you for the question. That's a really good question. Something that we probably could spend a whole episode on if we wanted to. All right, here's our next question. This says, what are the steps to be taken in order to have a full disclosure? What are your recommendations? I'm sure that we'll be covering this in other episodes, but I'll just touch on it really lightly. Disclosure is often done in a really poor way, where you either, you just find out or found out. And then oftentimes what happens is what we call death by a thousand cuts, where it starts to trickle out the information, where whoever's been caught just tries to say what they think has been found out, and then they try to close it all off and say, that's it, I swear, that's all there was. And then after some prodding and pushing, or after some guilt over the next couple of days or weeks, then another discussion happens, and then there's more that gets added to it. And then they say, oh, that's it, that's all there was, I promise that's all there is. And then eventually it's just this ongoing thing that drags on for days or weeks or sometimes months, where at the heart of the concerns for the betrayed spouse, what she's looking for an understanding of, like, I need to see the big picture and understand what I'm dealing with so that I can make some real decisions. And at the heart of the partner who's done the betraying, oftentimes there's this absolute fear that if I were to let everything out, that would mean I would lose my partner, and I don't want to lose them. And so there's this pinch point that happens where there's this constant, like, that's all there is, I promise. And then another question happens, or something else leaks out, or something else gets found out, or some guilt happens. And then it continues to trail on for a long, long time. And every time a disclosure happens like that, for the betrayed partner, she experiences that fresh. It's like it opens up everything again, and she has to relive everything over and over and over again. And so that's what we call it, a death by a thousand cuts. And it's really, really hard on the relationship, and it's hard on trust, because there's this confirmation over and over again, that's all there is, I promise, that's all there is. And then there's this breach of trust over and over again. And so it makes it harder to come back from in trying to heal the relationship if that's how it unfolds, which unfortunately is probably more of the standard than the healthy ways. And so when we look at a disclosure process, what we're looking for a few things, principally speaking. We're looking for the opportunity for a couple to come together and to practice a couple of principles. The first one is complete transparency and honesty. the truth is about any relationship that you will hit an absolute wall in your relationship if there's secrets in anything. And so if I continue to hold on to secrets, I might be able to patch things up for a while, but eventually as the relationship continues to try to develop, there will be a wall that gets hit because that feeling of hiding fuels disconnection. And so in a disclosure process, what we're looking for is we're looking for the ability for a couple to come together on both sides, hopefully in good faith, that they're trying to figure out what to do without any guarantees as to what's going to happen. You're not necessarily going into the disclosure process guaranteeing you're going to stay. You're going into the disclosure process with good faith that you're going to try to make the best decision you can as you gain the information that you need. And so what we like to do with the disclosure process, and hopefully this is done oftentimes with somebody who's experienced and can be a third party to help facilitate this, a good therapist or a good coach or something would be really helpful, is that we'll have the betraying partner create what we call their disclosure statement. And the disclosure statement will be basically their history of the acting out or of the infidelities that have happened. And the goal is for the betraying person is to, number one, be able to speak it and own it. And on a personal level, that becomes vitally important for healing and for progress. I can't tell you how many people come to me and they finally start to share things that they say, I knew that I was going to take what I just told you to my grave. And anything there, if there's that, I'm going to take it to my grave thing, if that doesn't get spoken, it's going to be that blocking point in the relationship. And so they get a chance to come and unburden themselves in terms of sharing the truth, which is what they should have been sharing all along with their partner, so their partner can make decisions. And so that disclosure statement gets produced. Oftentimes we'll have a partner create their own version of some type of a disclosure statement, which might be sharing some other things that maybe they've had happen in their own life, or decisions that they made, or ways that they maybe have affected the relationship. And they'll also disclose what they're hoping to gain by going through the process, by going through the disclosure process and acknowledging that this process is what it is for both partners. After that, we'll have the partner also create something called an impact statement. It's called other things, but in essence, the partner gets to then express to the person who's betrayed them all of the feelings that they need and feel like they want to express to that partner, how that betrayal has affected their life and in what ways it's affected their life, how it's affected the way that they feel about themselves and about relationships. And it's just a way to basically share their heart, their process, to share some of their pain. And the principle that's tied up into that is that the partner who's sharing that impact statement, gets a chance to speak what they're feeling, which allows continual processing towards all of those stages of grief that we talked about a little bit earlier today. And it allows the betraying partner to step in and hopefully get an opportunity to practice what we call holding space or providing empathy. So instead of getting defensive or instead of disappearing, they get a chance to hear it. They hear their partner's heart and their story. They get a chance to hold it. They get a chance to validate it. And then we oftentimes add in another piece, which is a statement of accountability that the betraying person will then finish with. And that statement of accountability will be the acknowledgement of how their choices may have affected their partner, the acknowledgement of how those choices affected themselves and the relationship, and oftentimes some level of an explanation of hopes and desires and intentions for moving forward. And if you get that all kind of put together, sometimes that takes several months to do that, working with like a therapist or somebody who's an expert to help figure out what questions you want to ask. Now, that's another part of the disclosure I forgot to include, is that we also allow for the betrayed person to ask some questions, clarifying questions that they might need to know that it's on their heart. And figuring out which questions to ask can be tricky, because there's some questions you think you need to know, and there's other questions that you absolutely need to know. And each partner's a little bit different. But that's sort of what like the disclosure process in a nutshell sort of looks like, if you can do it that way. Oftentimes it starts off in some other unhealthy ways where you either get the drive-by disclosure, which is like, oh, by the way, I'm having an affair, and then it's expected to just be like done with. Or you get the death by a thousand cuts, which is this ongoing unraveling of things. Either one of those doesn't really provide any help, and it doesn't provide any hope or direction for being able to move forward. So hopefully that's helpful, you guys. I know that I've been through several. I don't think the disclosure process is absolutely necessary, but just about every disclosure that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of a lot of them, have yielded some benefits on personal levels, and often on the relational level as well, because it kind of shows where people are at, and it at least allows for things to be in the open so that decisions can actually start to be questioned and made. So these are all really, really good questions, you guys. Really appreciate the fact that you're participating and sharing yourselves this way. I just want to say a couple of things based off of the questions that were asked today is that I know that this process is really difficult for all parties involved. That going through that feeling of betrayal is maybe one of the worst things that anybody could ever experience, because it strikes so close to our core need as human beings to be in securely attached relationships. And what I want to just reemphasize is that I see it over and over again, that it doesn't always play out this way. There's no guarantees. Everybody has to make their own right decisions. But when you get two people who are fully committed to the process of recovery, who are fully committed to becoming who they're meant to be and to doing the healing, that oftentimes that yields a marriage and a relationship with far more depth than it ever had in the first place. Because what happens is you go through hell together. My dad used to say a quote that said, a friend is a friend for a mile or two, but a brother is born for adversity. And I think that that's what relationships are, that when we find ourselves in a committed relationship, and if we have two partners willing to both put in their 100%, the adversities that we go through actually become some of the fertilizer that makes things flower and blossom and grow. If you don't get both partners putting in 100%, then oftentimes those things don't last, or it's right to not continue to be in the relationship. But when it does, it's a beautiful thing, and it yields an intense amount of strength and beauty. And there's, I'll just tell you a story really quickly to finish up here today. I bumped into an old friend of mine last night at my daughter's soccer game. For some reason, I didn't even recognize him. He came running up to me, and he's like, "Hey, Tyler, Patrick." He came running up to me, giving me this big hug, and I was sitting there standing, going like, "Who is this person? I can't put my finger on it. I interact with so many people every day." And I didn't have the template in my brain going on to recognize that this was an old friend from high school. And so he stepped back from me, and then he said his name, and then it clicked, and I was like, "Oh my!" And we had this just amazing kind of reunion. We're sitting here at the soccer complex where my daughter's having a soccer game in this public area, and then we start catching up with each other, and come to find out that he's actually been in recovery himself for quite some time. And he sat and kind of outlined a little bit about what his recovery process had looked like. And he told me about how he had betrayed his wife in so many different ways. And through tears in his eyes was, this is funny, you have two grown men talking at a girls' soccer game. Both of us have tears in our eyes. And he's telling me just how hard it's been for them, and how brutal the process has been, and how sad and heavy he feels about the things and damage that he'd caused. But then he looked me in the eye and he said, "This is the biggest blessing I've ever had in my life." He said, my relationship with my wife is so much stronger and better now. And he said, "We have to work at it every day, and it's still hard, but I know my wife and her heart, and she now knows me and my heart. And even though we're both not perfect and we both have struggles, we have complete commitment to each other. And I feel so grateful to know that she's so loyal to me, even after all the hell that I put her through. And that adversity is actually going to turn into one of the greatest strengths in their marriage as they go through the rest of their marriage and hit other hard times, because that's what marriages are. He's now, with his wife, they've now laid a foundational piece in their relationship by having been willing to go through the hell together, and both of them be committed, and he's highly committed. And that's now gone from a weakness to a complete strength in their life and their relationship. And I see that so many times when the process gets played out the right way. So there's hope, you guys. There's hope either way. There is healing that's possible. If you've experienced that betrayal in your life, I know that it feels like a pretty dark, deep hole sometimes, and sometimes it feels like it's never ending. Just know that you're not alone, and that there are some resources. If you're experiencing some form of betrayal, I just put a plug in here that it often helps to find some type of a support group or to develop that with people who are close to you. You can find support groups locally in most places. I know that Brandon and I both have online options as well that you guys could inquire about if you wanted to, or go to lovestrong.com or brandonpatrick.com and look at what the resources are for betrayed partners. But you guys, thank you again. Hopefully this is helpful, and really appreciate you being with us. Till next time.